To Germany now, where the parliament has just rejected a proposed new law to tighten immigration. Our correspondent Damien McGuinness was following events in the Bundestag.
It's all about whether you invite the far right in or whether you keep them out in the cold and don't work with them in German politics, this so-called firewall. And the reason why the Conservative leader's bill was so very controversial is that he effectively would have relied on the far right. We now know that that attempt has now failed. This is a real blow to Friedrich Merz, whose party is leading in the polls. And I think it shows that it potentially undermines his attempt to really, as he puts it, go all in on migration, because it shows that the majority in Parliament does not agree with his tactic. Now, I think what we've seen over certainly today and all week really, is a really ferocious debate about what the Conservative Party is all about. This is a party that's trying to find its way after years of being led by the centrist chancellor, Angela Merkel, who famously said, "Wir schaffen das," and said that Germany can take in refugees and migrants and can manage. Friedrich Merz has responded by shifting the party to the right. He was trying with this bill to win over right-wingers and lure them back, potentially those who are thinking about voting for the far-right AfD, by talking tough on migration. Now, this tactic hasn't worked in Parliament, and if you look at polls, it's not clear whether it would work at the ballot box either. Either way, he has suffered a blow today politically, and it'll also be interesting whether members of his Conservative Party didn't toe the line, because it was a named vote, and I think we'll get some more information about that, because the Conservatives are deeply split on migration. The former Chancellor Angela Merkel made an intervention yesterday and usually calling Friedrich Merz's tactics wrong, which is very unusual. And I think what we're seeing now is the Conservatives really trying to decide which way they're going to go now in the election campaign, because of course we have an election in 3 weeks' time, and there's everything to play for. So
yeah, I mean, it's going to be really,
has been a dramatic day in Parliament, really.
Yeah, as you say, Damien, it's going to be really, really interesting to get the readout of who has voted and how they have voted and where the support for Friedrich Merz has fallen away. Speaking of that election coming up very soon, what do you think this result does to his ambitions to be the next chancellor?
I mean, he's still way ahead in the polls. So his party is traditionally the largest party, has been for a while. It's polling at around 30%. The difficulty for him is who he's going to work with, and that's where it gets tricky. And the question will really be whether this whole very messy, very difficult debate over migration has helped or harmed the far-right AfD. Because if it boosts the numbers of the AfD, if voters look at this mess in Parliament this week and think mainstream parties just can't get it together, then it's going to eat into the support of the mainstream parties, because even if no other party will work with the AfD, it means there's fewer votes to go around within other parties. And what it means is even if Friedrich Merz does become Chancellor, which, looking at the poll numbers right now, he's more likely to do than Olaf Scholz, even if he does, if he has to cobble together a very difficult coalition with partners he doesn't want to work with, or maybe a three-way coalition, which is what we've had now, which was very unstable and argumentative, it's going to make his government very difficult. So he still might become Chancellor, but it's not much good for him if it's a very difficult government to lead, because Germany's got some big challenges ahead and needs a unified and quite strong government to deal with those challenges that we're now looking at.
Damien McGuinness in Berlin. Let's speak now to Dr. Ed Turner, who is chair of the International Association for the Study of German Politics and professor of German politics at Aston University. Ed, thank you very much for joining us on BBC News. Your reaction to what's been happening in the Bundestag, really dramatic scenes there.
Well, that's right. And a surprising result. I think I could help. A lot of the dissidents came actually from the Liberal Party, the FDP. There was a rebellion amongst Christian Democrats against Merz as well. I think 11 or 12 didn't vote with his party and abstained or voted against. But taking a step back, this has been an incredible week in German politics. Even in November, Friedrich Merz was saying that he would ensure that no motions were passed or laws were passed which were reliant on the far-right AfD. that changed. It changed due to tremendous pressure on asylum, migration, security issues, and now we see the current situation.
And ultimately, do you think this is going to boost numbers for the AfD, or may it have the opposite effect? Might it boost or encourage voters who disagree with the AfD and what it represents to come out and vote for parties that oppose the AfD?
Well, the AfD are absolutely cock-a-hoop. They've been laughing and joking, celebrating great day for democracy on Wednesday. The firewall's gone. Now they can attack Merz and say he's been an ineffective leader. That being said, that I don't think they're going to win the election. They're still a deeply disliked party amongst most German voters. So there's a limit to how high they can poll. And also certainly there will also be some moderate voters who will have been somewhat repelled by the decision of the Christian Democrats to accept the support of the AfD in an attempt to get motions and the law through.
Do you think, despite all of this, Merz's party, the CDU, will emerge as the biggest party in the forthcoming elections, and that it will be he who is trying to put forward bring together a coalition?
Well, polls in recent months have been extremely stable. For the Christian Democrats, they look like getting around 30%, and it would be a remarkable level of change for them to decline so that they didn't win the election. So Merz is going to be in a position probably to try to lead talks to form a government. That looks much harder, as your correspondent was saying after this week. There's real anger, real consternation amongst Social Democrats and amongst Greens, and he'd need at least one of those parties on board to form a government about what's happened. And so, coalition talks, which would already be quite difficult after the election, become really, really difficult. And the relationships involved as well, which are also necessary to run an effective government, those are really shot to pieces.
And of course, a lot of concern and questions by partners in the EU. And briefly, if you would, on this answer, Ed, as to what this means for one of the biggest hitters in the bloc, a country that they have traditionally looked to really be the linchpin of the European Union.
There are two problems. One is the likely next Chancellor of Germany has been proposing legislation which are at odds with European law. That could start a domino effect and see other nations also saying we want to turn people away at our borders, we want to shut our borders. That would plunge the EU into a really difficult position, maybe a crisis. Secondly, a political hiatus in Germany, a vacuum of leadership will also be very difficult for the European Union to negotiate.
Ed, thank you very much. Dr. Ed Turner there, Professor of German Politics at Aston University, Chair of the International Association for the Study of German Politics.